What causes way more deaths than people are aware of? Neglect in nursing homes. This is true and very sad. I had a sister who was special needs. She never could walk or talk. She was fed through a tube in her stomach, including water. When my father became ill and could no longer care for her, we put her in a home. They didn't give her enough water, and she ended up in the hospital. She got better, and we moved her to a different home, both in nice areas. The same thing happened again. She didn't get enough water, but could never recover the second time. She passed in the hospital. It was a brutal time for everyone. It would be nice if the US had a better safety net for people like my sister, but the fact of the matter is very little/none of that in reality. I worked as a janitor for a nursing home back in 2020, and the single hardest part of that job was relaying a patient's request to the nurse only to have them do nothing. It sucked having to walk back to a patient's room and finish cleaning without a nurse coming to aid them. That job sucked for a lot of reasons, but that helplessness was the worst by far. I was placed in a nursing home at 33 after having bilateral CD, cord decompression of the femoral head, and couldn't heal safely at the farm I lived on. The abuse was horrific. The food alone was enough to make a person ill, definitely insufficient for nutrients anyway. I was the youngest person, so therefore the only internet savvy. They begged me to reach out to their family and the local community via Facebook to highlight the abuse they endured. Nurses turned off call buttons at night instead of helping patients. Different dosages of drugs depending on the nurse, not changing the residents. No sanitation services including showers or toilet help. I contacted the ombudsman and director of the facility. I was told to not post without running it by the director, and definitely not about patrons. These folks gave me permission. Nothing changed. I left AMA against medical advice. They tried to gouge my insurance by charging thousands of RX that they didn't give me or gave me incorrectly. I fucking hate facilities like that. I meant to go back after I escaped, but I was so distraught I just couldn't. I eventually had a full hip replacement and healed in an apartment far away from them. Fuck that whole time. I'm 37 now. I worked in a nursing home for a few months. A patient died overnight because we didn't have a defibrillator in the building. In the time it took one of the PSWs to run to the movie theater a few blocks up to get theirs, while the other PSW did CPR, the patient was too far gone. Another time, I showed up for a shift, and one of my patients was gray. I called for the nurse. He said he was busy giving Tylenol and couldn't come. I went and found him, followed him until he finally said he would come, albeit he made it clear he thought I was being dramatic, and we ended up sending the patient to the hospital. I was the staff member who signed the DNR. She passed a week later in the hospital. When her son and daughter came back for her stuff, they said that the doctor said she would have passed within an hour without going to the hospital. She had been in respiratory distress for at least 6 hours when I got there. Another time, a patient developed a pressure sore on his bum and another on his foot. It went unreported for months before I got there. I eventually found a brief mention of a small laceration at the beginning of his pressure sore, several months back in the chart. The nurse labeled it as a scrape or a sore from his eczema for a few weeks until I cornered him and ripped into him about how many assholes a grown man should have. Hint, it's less than the 2 this patient had. They had to get a specialized nurse to come in twice a week to treat it. She reported the home for neglect, or the patient complaining of severe pain in her catheter. There was an obstruction in her urinary tract that went unnoticed for much longer than it should have because she just likes to complain. It's not important. I sat with that woman as she cried from the pain, night after night, and no one took her or I seriously. I left after a few months. I was going to get fired if I didn't. I was surprised I didn't get fired for the 2 assholes incident, and I couldn't keep watching my patients die. Care homes are brutal. Tripping. On average, around 17 people a year in the US die from injuries incurred after tripping and falling. Sepsis infections. This almost killed my aunt. She was in the hospital for several weeks. They pumped so much fluid into her, she didn't even look like a real person. They told us it wasn't looking good and her kidneys were simply shot. They told us to prepare for the worst. All of a sudden overnight her kidneys just kicked into high gear and her entire body started fighting again. She was able to get past the sepsis and survive. She was so weak she could barely stand, let alone walk. She had to go to physical therapy to re-strengthen her muscles. This woman would go on several mile hikes on weekends before this. She was not allowed to go to work until she could walk upstairs and grip objects in her hands. All of her hair fell out. She had long curly hair and it just all fell out. Once the fluid weight was gone, we realized she was about 20 olds lighter. It was terrifying. I am so happy she survived, but we have no idea how. Asthma and allergies. 10 people a day die from asthma in the United States. More people than died on 9/11 die every year due to smog, pollution, smoke, and allergies. But when my ex-husband had an asthma attack that put him into the ICU for a week, and everyone acted like it was some sort of joke. We divorced decades ago for non-health related reasons, but I never forgot that feeling of him almost dying in front of me while we were in the ER because he wasn't responding to the meds and there was nothing more the doctors could do. But people treat asthma and allergies like they're just something for hypochondriacs to fuss over. How many times do we see posts from people whose families think it's funny to just slip in some peanuts and see what happens? I mean, it's just an allergy, right? That candle smoke, with all the heavy perfume, can't hurt anyone. They're just being snowflakes. I'll blow it out before they get here. It's not a joke. Asthma and allergies can be anywhere from annoying to really scary. When I was 5 to 8, my parents would force me to eat stuff I was allergic to even when I begged them to let me have something else, and then get mad at me because they thought my reaction of swelling up and almost puking was a show I was putting on because I didn't like the food. When I was 13, I got cut off of my asthma medicine for 6 months and told to just cough and I'd be okay. It wasn't even about money because we had good health insurance and our dad was still getting inhalers for himself. It got harder to breathe every month, and I eventually got hypoxemia, reported by a doctor after testing when this ended. And I was dizzy and messed up in the head and ended up stealing cash and sneaking out at 3 a.m. and going to a nearby Walmart and buying medicine. That wasn't the only thing wrong with our home life. It was bad enough that we would get coached on what to say to caseworkers. So I also strongly considered flagging down a cop and just asking to go to foster care. Not wearing a helmet. A helmet saved my life as a kid. Hit a pothole, and the chain fell off my bike. It was one of those brake pedals. Hit a second pothole and fell off. Still broke both arms, but my helmet was destroyed. I got out of that with minimal head/face injury, but impact still messed with my C-spine pretty bad. I see kids going down my street on bikes, scooters, skateboards, and none of them had helmets. It makes me so anxious, and I don't want to seem weird suggesting they wear one, either. Newly living on my own, though I have baby face so I look a lot younger than 21. I am a pediatric emergency medicine doctor. Tio sleeping with babies. Ask any peds ER doctor. The most common deaths we see in our ER are babies that get smothered while sleeping. Co-sleeping in the falling asleep with the baby on the couch, letting the baby sleep on the edge of the bed and falling into the crack between the mattress and the wall. They usually come in between 600 and 700. That's when people are waking up for work and school and notice something is wrong. The kid is usually already long dead, but ENS usually do not like to call time of death on babies in the field. So they run the code when they get there and transport to our ER. We run the code for a bit. Often, the kid is clearly dead. It's mostly performative. It supposedly gives families closure to see the code performed and time of death called. Not sure how many I've seen. Usually several per year at our hospital, sometimes multiple within a month. Of all the kids that I participated in codes in or called time of death on, babies that died from unsafe sleep situations are the most common.